Today we're going to be creating this flower bouquet, so grab your Procreate file and let's get started. For this tutorial, we're going to be creating this flower scene together. And you'll notice that the sketch layer is on its own layer. You can always make that bigger, put it, wherever you want. And then we have the background, and this is just comprised of different brushes within the designer's toolkit. And you could always turn those off, or you could change the opacity, or just totally, turn those off and say, like, just build your own right there. So I'm going to turn it back on, and it's very much just made up of different brushes in, let's see, we've got, what did we use? Paper Maker. I think I used like Paper Maker 4 on there. We have some grunge revival brushes in there. And you'll see that they're just different colors. Like I used the pink background and then added the red on there. And I even changed the blend mode, changed the opacity just to change the look of it. And so, we could have it like that, or we can just go like that, just because it changes just that depth and that texture. So play around with that. I think those brushes are really fun to create some fun digital papers. And you could create them, of course, in endless colors and textures and just the whole mix. But we're really going to be focusing on the jar of flowers in this tutorial. And this is such a great exercise to set a timer and create your flowers. So it's not like we're looking for this, amazing work of art. This is more of a creative exercise to get the ideas flowing and to see how much you can accomplish in a set amount of time. And so, for instance, on this, I could say, okay, I'm going to work for 15 minutes. Let me see what I can create in 15 minutes. And I don't have a timer here with me, but I'm aiming to do this in like 15 to 20 minutes. And I'm going to be using the Crazy Lampshades. It's such a crazy palette. There's like a little fuzz or something on there. And you'll see this, like I'm adding it into the toolkit as well as the Procreate file or the Photoshop file, depending on what you want to use. You can also find I have a whole bunch of color palettes, I think like 20 or 21 or something on the website. If you haven't picked up the free palettes, I will link those as well here if that's what you want to do. But I'm going to be working with the Crazy Lampshades palette, and if that speaks to you, use that. But use whatever colors you want, because that's such a cool thing about flowers. They are found in nature in so many different variations of color, but then we don't even have to use what's found in nature, right? We could totally make our own colors in this and make it wild and, have all blue flowers, since blue flowers are kind of rare in nature. Or we can have, just a pink bouquet or whatever we want. So that's another thing I like about using sketches like this is we can come back and do a whole new scene or, a whole new sketch, a creative exercise, and it could look completely different just depending on the textures that we use, the brushes that we use, and the color that we use. So we're going to start with this, and I'm going to focus on the jar first, and then we'll just build up from there. We're going to go jar, stems, and then we'll look at the flowers. Okay, so I'm going to consider that our timer is starting now, and we're going to see how much we can get done in this 15 to 20 minutes, because there's definitely times, well, hold on, don't start the timer yet. There's definitely times where you could have a digital art, and you just keep going and keep going. And, like I've had pieces that have taken hours and hours, like 8 hours, maybe not all in one sitting, but I come back to it and layer on, add more highlights, add in more texture, add in more, shadows. And so this is, again, just a really fun, quick exercise to get our creativity flowing and just seeing what we can create in a short amount of time. All right, so I have the sketch layer up here, and then I have this layer 7. And we're going to just keep adding to, different layers. I'm going to go ahead and grab this turquoise for our jar. And let's see, I think I'm going to go into the brush factory and grab the chalky shader brush. And I'm going to have the sketch layer on top because I want to kind of build in this color behind the sketch layer so that I can still have that as a reference. And sometimes, you know, like for instance, in the toolkit, like I have a tutorial in there on the cake, and we end up taking off the sketch layer. We don't use it because we build out the illustration enough where it doesn't need the definition and the lines within the sketch layer. But in this, we're going to keep it in there, especially since it is kind of a creative exercise. Okay, so now start the timer. Okay, so just going to color this in, and you can adjust the size of the brush. If it goes a little on the edge, that's no big deal, right? Like that's one of the beauties of digital art, is we can go in there and erase it. So just laying down some color. Now I will say with this brush, like if I lift off the canvas and go back down and color over a part that's already been colored, it's going to lay it down a little bit thicker. And you can see that some parts are lighter than others. And what I do with that, especially because I think it lends a really cool translucent, kind of transparent effect to this, is just I'm going to go in there, I'm going to erase all this stuff, this extra stuff, but then I'll go in there with a soft blending airbrush and we'll kind of blend this out a little bit. So let me see, make sure I've got my eraser going on the edges of the jar, and then I'm going to just turn down that brush size a little bit just to get in here and get in those smaller places. Okay, and then once I'm good with the jar, again, I'm not looking perfection on this. I'm looking more of like, hey, let's do a sketch practice. If it ends up great, great. If it doesn't, you know, it doesn't. So I'm going to go to the blending tab right up here, and I have this soft airbrush. It's under the default airbrushing tools, and I'm just going to blend that out a little bit. Again, I'm working pretty quickly because I know that there's a timer going. And if that, you know, leaks over the jar, just go back in there with that eraser. Whoops. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead, and sometimes like I'll fill out the whole sketch or the whole project with the color, like the space layer, then I'll come in and add the shadows or add highlights. But in this particular case, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get like a darker color and kind of fill in these pieces of the raised glass, like around where the lid would screw on. And I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer on that, just because it's going to give me more control if I do need to go in there and, you know, change something or erase something, or maybe I'm going to add a Gaussian blur, or I want to lower the opacity. So let me think what brush I want to use for this. Okay, so for these little darker spots, I'm going to use the dried up marker, and it's in a darker turquoise. I think maybe a little bit darker than that. And your jar could be, you know, a completely different color. But what I'm going to do is just go over these little ridges right here. Nothing too precious, because again, I'm keeping that so-called timer in mind that we really don't have set, but kind of just keeping track of it in my head. And just going around those pieces that are just, whoop, that's too much, that are raised. Maybe I would go back over this one a little bit. I would probably want to blend that out just a touch with an airbrush because it looked a little bit too much. And then, you know, anytime we add like a shadow or a darker spot, we usually want to follow it up with a lighter highlight. And so I'm going to go in here and find like quite a bit of a lighter turquoise, maybe lighter than that. And then I'm going to use, I'm going to stick with the dried up marker, and just on the tops of these, just very lightly, just adding in, I think I want to go a little bit lighter because I don't want it to look too much like the background, and just adding in like where that light might be reflecting off that. So if that light's kind of, you know, coming in from maybe this angle, like an upper angle, whoops, get rid of that. And just thinking about, you know, with this being glass and we're not going for a complete realistic thing, but I think it just adds to it, and it kind of makes the viewer think like, oh yeah, there's some texture there. There's this raised glass piece. Okay, so I think I'm good with the jar now. I'm going to work on the stems next, and I don't want that on top of the jar. I actually want that under the jar. So I'm going to drag this layer behind the jar, and there's not a ton of greens. I mean, there are like 3-ish greens in this, and we'll kind of use this, the greens within this Crazy Lampshade palette as our starting point, but we might veer off and just, you know, add in a bunch of different greens, some variety there in getting, you know, our leaves going. So just gonna go about right there. And then for this brush, I think I'm just gonna use my liner pen. It's just such a simple pen. It's quick, it's effective. And I'm going to go in here and start coloring out these leaves. So this is basically just us, like in a coloring book, because we're just staying inside the lines of our sketch. And we don't have to be precious about it. We're just trying to lay down some color without, you know, getting too involved in like realism or texture. Even right here, we're just filling it up with color. And then maybe we want to use, since we have this one here, maybe we go up to this flower up here and we put some of this color on it. And I'm just going to imagine, you know, that line right there. And then I'll go back over here, add that line. And we've got some more leaves in here. So we're going to keep going. We're going to choose another green and keep, you know, adding that color in. So for this, I'm going to go over to this green. I think that's too light. May not be. Let's see. Let's add a little bit of gray, like a gray hue into that. And I'm going to stick with the liner. And again, I'm just going to choose a stem and color it. This, you know, these little exercises like this are so relaxing because they do remind me of, you know, like being a kid and having like a box of crayons and just coloring, and it doesn't matter what we end up with really, as long as we're having fun. So my aim right here is just quick without, you know, any sort of perfection, because this might serve as just getting the creative juices going for some other project that we might be working on. And that's what I usually tend to do. Like I'll do something simple like this, and then I'm like, okay, I'm gearing up for this other thing that I have to work on. So this feels too dark to me. I'm going to lighten that up a little bit, and we're going to keep on filling it out. Okay. And while we're definitely not looking for any or too much realism, you know, when we have like a bouquet of flowers, I love fresh flowers, and when we have those, we generally tend to get them, especially if they were done at the florist, or, you know, like you have your I love grocery store flowers, they're going to come with a variation of green. And so that's kind of what we're going for here. And we've almost wrapped up all of our green. Now you can see that right here, this turquoise, it's overlapping that green right there. And there's so many different ways we could handle that. Like we could go back up to the turquoise later, and we could change the blending mode, even just by going to darker color, like it shows that green coming through there. If we like that effect, that really shows that background there. I like that because it picks up more of that texture. What if we turn the opacity down just a little bit? I'm going to go about, let's leave it at 75. I'm going to go with the darker opacity. We may change that in a little bit, but I'm kind of liking that right now. Okay, so now we're going to go to these little accent pieces up here. You know, they're kind of like baby's breath or something like that. Like they're just there to add to the look of things. So I'm just going to make a layer above our leaves, and For this, I think I'm going to go kind of like a creamy-ish color. I don't know. Let's see. Let me go over to yellow and see if I like that a little bit better. Maybe, yeah, I'm good with that color. So choose your color that you want to use there. And for these accent things, I think I'm going to use Junk Drawer pen. It's kind of a go-to for me. It works well. So just, again, not being too precious about it. And we're just going to color these in. And you could definitely make yours, you know, all different colors, or like this stem is, you know, one color, and then the other stems are a different color. But I'm going to make mine all the same. You can see like the marks they're bigger than our sketches. I'm okay with that. Just gonna kind of put that behind there. That's good. And then go over here. And there's not even really, you know, the sketch was a little bit incomplete on my part because there's no connecting stems down there. But we're good with it. We're going to keep rolling with it. Okay, so let's work on this flower right here. Okay, and I'm going to add a new layer. I think I'm going to make this more of a lighter flower color. That works for me. Okay, so on that layer, the Junk Drawer pen is working well, so I'm just going to stick with that one. If you want to try out a different brush at this point, go for it. So I'm just going to use this just to get some color in there really quickly. Hopefully you can see that. Now my hand's kind of in the way. I like this pen because it's pretty solid, but it also has, you know, some rough texture on the edges. Let's see, I'm gonna do just a yellow center. I'm not even gonna bother going on any layer. And I kind of want like a orangish ring around it, but I am gonna make a new layer for that because we're gonna do some stuff to it. So let's pick up one of our shading brushes. First of all, I'm gonna use Shady Shader number 1. You could definitely use number 2. Maybe I want to use number 2. What do I want to do? Let me see. I'm going to go with number 2 first, actually. And then I'm just going to come in here and make it smaller. And just kind of go over that. So it's pretty thick on there, but I want to have it look more blended. So what I'm going to do is turn down the opacity. I'm going to go about like 80, 79%. And then go through our blend modes and see if there's one that I really want to use. That hard light kind of looks good. Let me see if I go up here to darken. And then if we go over here under the adjustments and add a Gaussian blur just of like 5%. And just sliding that to the right, I think that ends up looking like it's just a little bit softer. I like that. Okay, so now we're going to work on this flower right up here. 2 more flowers to go. Okay, so I'm feeling like I'm wanting like a light-ish purple. This feels a little too unnatural. I think it needs a little bit like toned down just a tiny bit just to make it, oh yeah, I had that shader on there. Okay, let's start a new layer, but I want that purple to be not as bright as it was. And I'm going to go over to the rough marker. We'll turn that down a bit because, you know, our sketch right here is quite a bit more narrow. Actually, a little bigger than that. And again, I'm trying to work fast, keeping my timer in mind because I may have other things to do all day instead of this little sketch. But these practice sketches, I think, are so great if you do them in, you know, a digital art form or you do them like in an actual sketchbook. that's so freeing when you can just do these little exercises that don't require a lot of time, that don't require a lot of skill, they don't require anybody's input to them. It's just you, your sketchbook, whether it's on Procreate or in a traditional sense, and you marking up on a page. And if it ends up great, that's great. If it doesn't, who cares? On to the next. So I think sketchbooks can be very liberating, or sketch practices like this. Okay, so let's go to a new layer. I'm going to use a little bit of a darker purple, and I'm going to go over to, let's use the old ballpoint pen. And I'm going to just kind of, whoop, that's too big. I'm going to lower that down and just make some random marks. Okay, I'm liking that. And let's say I'm going to pick up this white-ish color, maybe make it a little more white. And I'm just going to go in, not even on a different layer, and I'm just going to do like a lighter center for that. Good with that. And let's go over to our rose. Okay, for this one, I'm thinking she really wants to be the star of the show. So we're going to make a new layer, and I'm going to go to this really hot pink color. And for the base color, I'm going to lay it down with the rough marker in the Brush Factory. We've really been sticking with Brush Factory in this one, besides the background. So I'm just going to keep on with that. And this is just a point where we're just laying down that base color. So we don't have to be precious about it. It's just getting that color in there. Okay, so we could finish there and be good with it, but I'm going to add just a little bit more definition and a little bit more, I don't know, sparkle, pizzazz to her. Let me think how we're going to do this. Mindful that I'm on the timer. So I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to go with like a reddish color, a little bit darker. And then I'm going to go up and grab a shady shader. I think I'm going to go with shady shader number 1. Might need to turn that down to about 10%. And I'm not going to go in there, and detail every line, but I'm just going to pick up little areas. That's too big. Of this, because, roses, they're obviously not all the same color, and they have different areas that are going to show up lighter and darker. And so just kind of touching on that a little bit. Doesn't really have to make a lot of sense. What I'm thinking, and I'm not sure how this is going to turn out, but this is kind of just that point of exploration of I don't know, let's see what happens. So I'm thinking I'm going to go and grab one of my attic papers from the Toolkit, and we're going to use this as a clipping mask. And so we can start a new layer. Actually, we don't need to start a new layer. Let's grab a paper. So I'm going to look into the attic papers folder, and I'm going to go with paper 7, but even though that's quite a bit lighter, it doesn't mean it's going to stay that way, because I think we're going to put a little blending mode on there as well. So I like how, if you can see, there's some different textures in there. So I kind of want to go over to the edge, and then I'm just going to throw that clipping mask on. And we're going to blend that out so it looks a little different. I didn't really use paper 7 for the color of the paper, but more or less I wanted that texture in there. It is super subtle. Somebody else might look at this and not see it at all, but I know it's there. So I'm going to go in and let's try linear burn. So it makes it kind of show up, like darker and red. And which is a little bit too much for me. Again, this could be personal preference, but I'm going to turn that blend mode, the opacity down to, nope, sorry. I didn't mean to turn the opacity down on the actual paper, but rather on the shaded area that we just drew. So I'm going to go with 73. And then I'm going to go grab that airbrush and very slightly, maybe just blend that out just a little bit to make it look a little more natural so it doesn't have those hard lines in there. Looks more like, kind of has like a gradient effect. So I'm really, really liking that. So here's what I'm going to do from here, because I want to combine all these floral pieces and have them on their own layer, because I want to put a drop shadow in there. I might add some, I don't know, I'm thinking something else to this jar. So I generally, when like we have all these layers in here, and I don't want to mess those up, so this would be my working file. Granted, this is just a quick sketch and just a creative exercise, but there's, you know, I could use this for something later on. And so what I would do from here is just go and select that and duplicate it, so that we have our working file, and then we have one that we can take a step further. Like you'll see, I have different versions of this because I've been working on it. And so I'm gonna leave this file right here as my working file, and then I'm gonna go back into the one that we duplicated. And let's see, I think I'm going to, from here all the way down to here, let's combine all these layers first off. Gonna just merge some of these down, especially the ones that had the blending mode in, just merge those down. And then I'm going to just pinch those together, so then we have all of our flowers right there on a separate layer. Okay, so what I want to do right here is duplicate this flower layer, and then I want to make them, I just want to give that a little bit of a drop shadow. And so this bottom flower layer, I'm going to go up to adjustments and brightness, and I'm going to turn that all the way down. And so essentially we just gave ourselves like a black layer, and we're going to use that for a drop shadow. And so with that layer highlighted, I'm going to bring it down just a little bit, because again, the way I put those highlights on the jar, it's like the light is coming from this way. And so that's just a little bit too much of a drop shadow there. So I'm going to go ahead and bump the opacity down. And then we're going to throw a little Gaussian blur on there just to soften it, and it's not that harsh black layer. And so I'm going to go to about 6% on that. I'm liking that. That's looking really good. But I think we need a little bit of highlight on this jar. And so I'm going to go above the jar layer. And then, let's see, I'm going to go back to that turquoise and pick up a really light, very, very light, whitish, aquish, turquoise, you know, just a very light aqua color. And then using the rough and chalky, I think it's such a great, it's a good brush. I love the rough and chalky brush because it's great to fill in color, but it's really nice to add some highlights, especially like to this jar. So I'm just going to put it over here. Just one little quick swipe. And then from there, I'm going to lower the opacity just a bit, and then throw on some Gaussian blur just to blend it out. So I'm liking it. I like it a lot. Okay, let's check our time and see if we made it within our 15-ish minutes. So I think our total draw time was closer to about 23 minutes, but close enough. It was really fun to do this, and kind of makes me want to start over and just come up with a totally different color palette and see how it looks. If you create this for yourself, share with us in the Facebook group. It's so much fun to see everybody's work in there, and I'd love to see yours. Thanks for joining me.